Whew, hey, okay. It's the Nazarite Brigadier Hebrew lore from days of yore, live here in Jerusalem. And I think it's one of the first Fridays in the last few weeks, anyway, where I've actually had the time to sit down and talk about something. I want to talk about the first verse of this week's Torah portion, Vayeshev. And I'm going to read a midrash. It's a very famous midrash. I'm going to read the English translation. It's Bereshit Rabbah, right? Midrash Rabbah, Bereshit 84, verse 3. Well, verse or sentence number 3. 84 3 anyway. And here's how it goes. Yaakov sought to dwell in tranquility, but then the anguish of Yosef immediately pounced on him. So, just some context. In this week's Torah portion, Yaakov wants to sit where his father once sat, right, in Canaan. But then Yosef and his brothers, that whole thing comes about. And so Yaakov wants to dwell in tranquility, lashevet beshalva. This week's Torah portion is Vayeshev, meaning that he dwelled or sat. And the Midrash goes on to say that when Yaakov decided to kind of settle down, other things kept interrupting, seemingly, or so to speak. Right? Yaakov sought to dwell in tranquility, but then the anguish of Yosef immediately pounced on him. The Midrash continues and says, the righteous seek to dwell in tranquility, but the Almighty says, is it not enough for the righteous, that which is prepared for them in the world to come, that they seek to live in tranquility even in this world? In other words, the Midrash, it sounds kind of pessimistic and pissy on the part of the Almighty. It's like, no, you cannot have any tranquility in this world. It's enough what's going on in the next world. Here's the thing. During the entire Torah, the whole idea of the next world is never mentioned ever. We have a hint, right, of Eden and the fact that the tree of life has yet to be partaken of. So there's like a hint of it, or maybe even more than a hint, but it's certainly not repeated. There is no afterlife. There is no other world. There is no heaven or hell in the afterlife conceptual kind of way. Right? It does not exist in the five books of Moses. Plenty of it exists in Midrash and in external teachings and rabbinic Judaism for sure. Mishnah, the Talmud. In the Torah itself, it does not say anything about it. It all deals with this life. And so Yaakov wanted to dwell in the land of Canaan, right? He wanted to dwell and he wanted to be tranquil, says the Midrash. And then immediately, almost as a response to that, the whole rift between Yosef and his brothers happens, and for 20 odd years, Yosef is thought to be dead, or at least is mourned for as somebody who is seemingly dead and not coming back. Yaakov tells his relatives, his family, I will go down to my grave mourning for my dead son Yosef. Now, later on, in a different Torah portion, Yosef and his father finally meet. They come together, they embrace, and they have some time in Egypt before the passing of Jacob and later Joseph. But right now, with Vayeshev, Yaakov wants to settle down. He had all kinds of things going on with Lavan, and he had all kinds of things going on with Dinah, his daughter Shechem, all of that. And then he finally returns to sort of his home, right, where his father dwelt, and he cannot rest. The anguish of Yosef immediately pounces. Pounces on him. Pinky, come on now. And so the righteous seek to dwell in tranquility, says the Midrash. Hang on. Hey, Pinky, can't you see I'm trying to do something here? Okay. Okay, Pinky. Okay, I'll tell you what. Would you like to be here and teach and speak as well? You want to speak instead of me? Ruff, 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 ruff. Okay. So, okay. Right then. The Midrash says, the Midrash says, the righteous seek to dwell in tranquility, but the Almighty says, is it not enough that the righteous, is it not enough for them, that which is already prepared for them in the next world or the world to come? They seek to rest and live in tranquility in this world? It's like, where, first of all, what? Who says that the righteous seek to dwell in tranquility? And who says that they should even be taking into account what is already prepared for them and set aside for them? It's like the Midrash and the Torah here the Midrash is kind of bringing in elements which are foreign to the Torah. Right? Kind of. The righteous seeking to dwell in tranquility. Maybe you could go with that. But anything to do with the world to come, and anything to do with you could say that even Yaakov wanted to sit in tranquility and settle down. Does one man wanting to do it mean that all of the righteous people want to do it? It's like, no, I take issue with this midrash. Now you could make the claim that I'm simply not understanding it properly. It needs to be interpreted more, and sure, but just at face value, look, I agree with the midrash, but I'm saying it seems at first glance. This isn't my first time glancing at it. I'm just saying it seems to be kind of foreign when you're speaking of Vayeshev, and it seems to be putting words in the mouth of God that God never speaks. Now, many midrashim do this. They do it to convey a point. This doesn't mean that this is actually what righteous people seek, and it doesn't mean that this is actually what the Almighty says. The Midrash is using the story of Yaakov and Yosef as a kind of, as a tool, right, to teach us something. Do not seek tranquility. Seek meaning. Don't seek tranquility, because you don't know if you're going to get that. Life sometimes has such a chaotic nature to it, and such a random, a randomness to it. And you could be living the most righteous life, doing well by everyone, doing everything right, and you get cancer, and 6 months later you're dead. That's life. And the Midrash is like, don't necessarily seek tranquility. Seek what's meaningful. What does it mean that the righteous seek to dwell in tranquility? To dwell in tranquility, you can look at it as a kind of attaining nirvana, right? There are two types of bodhis, two types of woke people in like traditions, let's say, of Buddhism. One is the one who was awakened and who simply keeps it to himself, let's say, and goes on his own thing. That would be someone like Noah, who builds an ark around him and around the others right with him, and they basically sail off while the rest of the world is in ruins. And then there's a second type of woke individual, a second type of Buddha, let's say, or Bodhi, which, let's say, attains this nirvana, attains this tranquility, but doesn't remain there. He goes back, and this is like the Abrahamic sort of righteous person. He goes back in order to share that wealth with the community, let's say. The righteous people who seek to dwell in tranquility, they won't get what they want. Right? Yaakov wanted to do it, and he got Yosef in all those troubles. Righteous people, says the Midrash, seek to do this, to dwell in tranquility, but the Almighty says, no, you have work to do. You don't get to sit in tranquility. Sometimes you get to experience it. If it comes your way, mazel tov, good for you, enjoy it, embrace it, own it, but remember that you have work to do. The work that, let's say, Yaakov and Yosef had to carry out, in prophecy and conceptually, is that work of having that fire, being that flame, and right, and Yaakov with the 12 tribes, Yosef with the kingship, Yosef as the ruler. And you know what? I don't want to get off track. I want to stay here with this midrash. Is it not enough for the righteous, that which is prepared for them in the next world? Right? They seek to live in tranquility here in this world, says the Almighty. They will not get this. There will always be challenges. There will always be anguish. There will always be suffering. You can't stay in your nirvana state. There's work to do. And so don't seek it. Now, not all midrash is 100%, yes, do this, act this way. These are the sages at the time of the Second Temple and a few centuries afterwards. These are the sages talking about the Torah, right? It's teachings that they are sort of deriving from the Torah. And this idea of Vayeshev Yaakov and then Yosef, Yaakov wanted to sit. No sitting for you, Yaakov. No soup for you. You're going to have trouble with your kids. You're going to have trouble with famine. You're going to have trouble with all of the things that happened until him and Yosef met in Egypt. Until Yaakov and Yosef met in Egypt, there was so much. So many things went on. But it starts here with this week's Torah portion. Yaakov wants to be tranquil, but then Joseph comes along with his dreams and his ideas and the animosity. And no, there's no tranquility for you, Yaakov. You're going to be mourning for 20-something years. You're going to be feeling that sorrow. And it's like the midrash. For those who want to look at it cynically, there's plenty of room to take this midrash and say, "Screw this." And screw any God who would say this, any almighty who would say, no, no, you cannot sit in tranquility. Let me make your existence even worse. And somebody who's less cynical would say, no, this is here to elevate the individual. It's here to put challenges in their way for them to overcome it. It's because this life is meant for work. You're supposed to carry a burden. It's supposed to be a labor. And if any tranquility comes your way, say on the Shabbos that's about to come in, if any tranquility happens to come your way, embrace it. It's certainly something that has its place, but it's not your place to sit in tranquility, to dwell in tranquility. The work of the righteous never ends. It seems to be from a very sort of harsh place. And the what the Midrash says here, which kind of, it doesn't contradict the Torah, but it's a little foreign to Torah when it says here that God says, is it not enough for the righteous, that which is prepared for them? Why do I care about what's prepared for me? I shouldn't be thinking of what's prepared for me. I should be thinking of this world and its challenges. I should be thinking of this world and making it so that which is prepared in the next world, that I'll be able to take some of it while I still draw breath and share it with the community here. Something like that. To bring part of that next world into this world. Again, I'm not talking about the afterlife. I'm talking about the world to come. That place where, well, let's put it this way. The righteous person, a person who is connected with oneself, right, and with the divine, you're able to widen your spectrum and bring a lot more of that next world into existence for everyone else. And not in a vain kind of way, I know what's good for you. No, no, from a very humble place of just doing your thing, doing your work, and not sitting or dwelling in tranquility. When people sit and dwell in tranquility, it tends to make them complacent, soft, entitled, and not in a good way. Challenges and hardships and suffering is part of what keeps us awake, alive, aware, and you can choose how to look at it. So sometimes maybe some people would look at this midrash and write off all midrash and all rabbinic teachings. It's like, what? First of all, you don't know what God says. Second of all, you're taking this thing in the Torah where no next world is mentioned, and you're trying to sort of to place it on here as if this is something the Torah is trying to convey. You could look at it that way. I choose, first of all, there are ways to interpret Midrash. You need to learn how to interpret Midrash, rabbinically speaking. You can't take just Midrash at face value. Some you can, others you decidedly can't. You need to learn what it is that you're supposed to be gleaning from this Midrash, or what it is you can do on your own within how you can study it. Now, I'm not a scholar and I'm not a learned man, and I look at this Midrash and I understand it very plainly. We are not meant to seek tranquility. We are not meant to seek to dwell or settle down in tranquility. There is that time for settling down and dwelling and being tranquil, but not something that should be a long term plan. That lacks meaning, that lacks purpose. To sit in tranquility means, according to this midrash anyway, there's nothing going on. The work is all done. And that should not be your life. It should be part of your life, like in the Shabbat. Shabbat is where the work is done and you can rest. That's one day out of the week. That's a seventh. And the Midrash here, I think, is urging people who are righteous or those who seek to dwell in tranquility not to have so many hopes. Even the most tranquil people they have God breathing down their necks, saying, you have a lot already stored away, a lot of good things that you did, a lot of righteousness that you executed on, and all that sure is waiting for you in some other world. But we're dealing here with this world. And in this world, the hustle never ends. Wait, did I just What? What happened? Nothing happens. Okay. Something happened with the monitor just now. It just turned off and on. I don't know what's going on. I hope that I'm still broadcasting or that everything has been okay. All right. Now, I don't know if I'm making any sense right now. I just thought of this midrash earlier today and I wanted to speak of it now. I'm not doing it justice. I'm certainly not doing it justice because I'm taking it not completely out of context, but this midrash is part of a list of midrashic teachings pertaining to that first verse of this week's Torah portion. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz meguer aviv be'eretz Canaan. If I'm not mistaken, that's it. I'm just reciting it offhand. Right? That God sat in the land of that Yaakov sat in the land of Canaan. And then what happened with Yosef immediately is followed. That's the next verse. That Yosef and everything that happens there. There are times to seek tranquility and to embrace it and own it and be one with it. But I think part of the idea of righteousness is that there's always work to do. What did Bob Marley say? Right, I am a living man. I have work to do. Many people have said that. I'm just thinking of his line right now. As long as we're living, to try and live that righteous life means that you don't rest. You have times to rest, but you yourself, you can't say the work is done and now I can sit back and relax. No such thing. You know when you can do that, says the Midrash? In the next world. Don't seek tranquility. That's for another time, another place. You'll sleep when you're dead. Now is the time when you're alive and you need to make things happen. So it's actually a call, right? This Midrash, it's not some trying to put words in the mouth of the Almighty. They're trying to make a point here, which is that this is a time for toil, labor, and work. So get on with it. Get on with it, because if you don't get on with it and you think that everything's okay, then it's going to come and smack you in the ass, from out of left field. You won't know how, and you won't know where it hit. You wouldn't know what hit you. There will always be challenges. There will always be hardships. You can either anticipate them. You can either try and work with that sort of mindset and framework, or you could say, no, this world is for happiness, tranquility, and sometime there will come a time where I'll be done with all of it, and I will be able to sit back, put my feet up, and be tranquil. Say, no, usually in this world, 90 something percent of the time, I think, you get moments of tranquility. You get times, dedicated even to tranquility, like Shabbos, but don't make the mistake of thinking that that's your life. Your life is here to get the job done and to carry on. And if this job is done, try taking on something even larger if you can hack it. Try to always be pushing that envelope of what you can do, of how much righteousness and divine revelation of the good kind, of the right kind, can you bring into yourself, through you, into those around you. A righteous person has a responsibility. As you grow, I think, at least potentially, as you grow, so does your circle of influence, your spectrum, of where you have an effect. The righteous people have a great effect in this world. There's a very famous teaching of 36 Lamed Vav righteous men and women who keep the world turning, so to speak, and is a deal, because of them, and it's their merit that is keeping the world functioning and working and from crumbling to ruin. But I digress. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. Okay, so hello, people. Hi. The burning element says, Shalom, shalom to you. And my father says, if I don't see you no more in this world, see you in the next world, don't be late. No, because I'm a voodoo child. That's right. So my father quoting Hendrix there. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining me, those watching now, those watching later. It's a weird time to be doing it, but I'm glad that I had, almost 20 minutes now to talk about this. It was again kind of spontaneous and off the cuff. I didn't write down any bullet points or anything. I just spoke what I thought about this midrash. Please read the midrash itself in Bereshit Rabbah 84:3, because you can understand it in a different sort of way, and in context you can understand it in a different sort of way. And I don't even know if the words that I said right now were even coherent. Maybe it was just a jumbled ramble of verbal diarrhea. But the bottom line of there's work to do, so let's get on with it, that applies, I think, to all of us, whether we are righteous or not. There's work to do. There's work to be done in this life, and it's on us, it's incumbent on each and every one of us, if we can afford it, to ask those questions of what it is that I should be doing here with my time in this life. And sitting back, being tranquil from now until my last breath is usually not the right answer. And often, many times, through taking on that responsibility, the toil, the labor, the hard work, through taking on that purposeful life, that's where we find tranquility. Not in abstaining from everything and doing nothing, but in doing things in a very precise, purposeful manner. that's where we find the most meaning. That's where we find that richness of life. It doesn't have to be constant happiness and tranquility. Those things are fleeting many times. But meaning and the fullness of leading a full life, the richness of leading a life where you are understanding that you are a beast of burden and that you carry that with you. You take on that burden voluntarily, you say, I have work to do, I'm going to figure it out and get it done. That's something that has a lot of there's a lot of utility, I think, in living that way. I'm not living that way 100%, but certainly in some areas of my life I'm more focused than others, and I can see how this might be the case, where no, you take tranquility where you can find it. You take happiness and those good vibes where you can, you embrace them when they come your way. You take advantage, right? Carpe diem, carpe noctem. But generally, there's work to do. There's work to do. And it's not about the next world, it's about what you can do in this world still. I hope and pray that we have a wonderful weekend, a good Shabbos. Thank you. Oh, Lisa is here. Shalom, Boker Tov to you. Shalom, shalom. It's good to see you here. I hope and pray that we lead the kind of life where we will be able to take the time out to ask these bigger questions of ourselves, contend with them, figure them out to the best of our ability, and get on with the work, that work of righteousness, that work of Torah, of commandments, of doing good in this world. You know, when I guess we all have maybe a different idea of how to go about it, but I'll leave that to you. Right? To make the world a beautiful place on different levels, that's up to each and every one of us, wherever we can make it happen. Let's have a great weekend. Let's rest. Let's have good food. Let's have time for Torah, time for love, time for family, to rest from our labor. God willing. Shabbat Shalom.